Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown. Play action. Allen deep downfield, wide open.
Welcome into a new edition of the Going Deep podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Masseri, here with Mike Bunt to talk Chiefs, Bills, Sunday, 4 o'clock, prime time. Tony Romo again on repeat. Lots to go over here. Also touch a little bit on the stomping of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But this is about Chiefs week, Mike. Yes, we enjoyed the victory on Victory Monday. We're here to talk Chiefs. We have a special guest coming up at 7 right on the nose. So we're bringing it to you early here at 6:30, 7 o'clock to 7:30. We'll have a guest. And that's a really action-packed show. Mike, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. It doesn't get any bigger than Chiefs week. This is what it's all about. As important of a regular season contest as you can get. And week 6 of the season and coming off a stomping, as you said, of the Pittsburgh Steelers, feeling good right now.
That's great. We'll take a quick 5 minutes to talk about the Steelers game. I think that's about what we should allot for it. You were there. Give us your opinions on the field, what your thoughts were. You don't have to break down every play of that game here as we're on to Kansas City. But tell me about your initial reactions and your thoughts about how that game went.
Just complete domination. The Bills crushed them. Josh Allen was getting whatever he wanted. In fact, that could have been way more than a 35-point victory. That could have been a 50-plus point victory if the Bills wanted to. Josh Allen missed Diggs on the throw early in the game that ended up resulting in a field goal. You remember the blocked field goal. So there was still some points left on the board. The interception in the end zone, the fumble into the end zone. But the Bills were essentially unstoppable when they weren't making their own mistakes. The 98-yard touchdown pass, incredible into the wind to Gabe Davis. The 62-yarder, an even more impressive play by Davis, catching it one-handed and then stealing it from Fitzpatrick. Stephon Diggs got his. Nice to see Khair Elam get his first career interception. Was a tough day overall, but he made a play at the end of the half. James Cook, Khalil Shakir, both getting their first NFL touchdown. So how can you not be excited? A 35-point win. The Bills went into that game as heavy favorites, and they took care of business with a few guys out of the lineup. And now, hopefully, you'll have Poyer, Knox, and some of those guys back for what could be a game that eventually decides the 1 seed in the AFC.
Now, Mike, one thing I wanted to ask you, though, specifically to the audience and the fans. You know, we saw an eruption during the long touchdown to start the game. How are the fans? Like, how are the fans acting now with these drubbings, with these big games where you don't really feel like you're ever really threatened, especially, I mean, outside of the first 2 plays, I don't think you ever had any anxiety. And immediately I tweeted, like, I would like Taiwan Jones to never touch the ball again. He didn't. I thought that was bizarre to not have Khalil Shakir. There's not a lot to lose with Khalil Shakir there. He's not going to do worse than whatever that was. So what was the reaction? We couldn't really tell here, observing and watching film. We can't really tell. Give us a little briefing on, was the stadium still pumped? Was it just kind of an expectation now at this point when you're not playing someone like the Chiefs or the Ravens? What's going on the field on a fan perspective?
Yeah, it's still electric at Highmark Stadium. That 98-yard touchdown, the fans were getting into it. They were enjoying it. Same with the 62-yard touchdown to Gabe Davis later in the half. The fans are still electric and having a fun time at the stadium. More so patient in these games. If they do have a struggle here or there, it's not the groaning and the moaning that here we go again, like you used to feel so often during the drought years. But more so just eagerness and anticipation whenever the Bills offense has the ball and expecting the Bills defense to come up big and make plays when necessary. The only thing that's kind of different from before is now with these drubbings, you do see a portion of the crowd leave early, which is kind of uncommon in Buffalo. But when you're winning by 30 plus points in the second half, can you really blame anyone for trying to beat the traffic? But that's really the only major difference compared to the past. It's just as electric as ever before. Just the Bills are killing teams so quickly that fans are leaving a little bit earlier than in the past.
Yeah, I'm not gonna hate on them for that scenario. I'm not gonna totally hate on them for leaving early. That's not necessarily indicative. You're gonna have some fun. If the starters come out, that is totally basically time that I think it's acceptable to leave. So I think it's totally acceptable to leave midway through the third quarter if you're really aggressive at halftime, if you really wanted to. But I do believe that that's an acceptable time. If the team's basically saying we've won the game, we've won it so much that we're not even going to play, our offensive line or our quarterback. I do believe that is time. It is okay. The team basically said it is okay to leave, in my opinion. So all around great game. You had to take a little bit from it. I would like to see a little bit more from Kaiir Elam. I thought he struggled mightily. He told us that. That's not an opinion. Statistically, he was late on his breaks. Those are scenarios that we can't have this weekend against the Chiefs when those plays might matter a little bit more. Marquez Valdez-Scantling has been playing better as of late. His slow start. Mecole Hardman is going to do his thing occasionally, and Juju Smith-Schuster hasn't been the world's best acquisition. So their wide receiver room is pretty poor in Kansas City. We're going to talk about that here shortly at 7:00. But to kind of wrap up the Steelers game, Mike, outside of the big win, are you just taking it away as just another W? What do you got for us on what's your final recap of what are you taking from that Steelers game other than a 4-1 record?
Not really taking too much out of it. I think Pittsburgh is looking like one of the bottom teams in the NFL this year. It's weird to say. They haven't had a losing record in Mike Tomlin's entire tenure as their head coach. So you don't want to just assume that they're horrible, even with the poor start. But I looked at that as a game where you just entered, took care of business. You avoided any trap that might have been out there entering the contest. And then you just move on. The offensive explosion was great to see from a fan perspective, but it doesn't give me any extra confidence going into the future. Pittsburgh was playing minus TJ Watt. They weren't able to get much of a pass rush. Their secondary was Swiss cheese. They couldn't stop anything. The Bills had their way. So what's going to be more important is, can the Bills do this against Kansas City? And can the Bills get stops against one of the truly elite offenses in the NFL? So I'm not really taking away much from Sunday other than it was a nice, enjoyable afternoon at Highmark Stadium, but there's really nothing else I'm going to bring into this KC week from that.
It's fair enough, Mike. That's good analysis. I don't think you can get too high on it. Fairness, just like you can't get too low off of the Dolphins game. I don't think there's really anyone that can really say that you've learned much from this game other than the team is good and they'll stay good. I don't really think you can get too much into the weeds as much as we'd like to talk about how good Davis was or how maybe need some a little bit of improvement from Elam. I don't think there's really a ton to take away in that regards, other than we need a little bit more sample size from a couple of different things. Gabriel Davis did show that he is the dominant wide receiver too. The Bills expected him to be. He took a little bit of flack. He has been slightly injured in his career, I will say. He has had times and moments of short-term injuries. But that leads me to the next point. We talked a lot about the Steelers game to start with. They're going to get to the Chiefs game here right at 7:00, right at the top of the hour, but did want to talk about the rumors and the rumblings of Christian McCaffrey. We've had a lot of local media, some national media, and people in between talk about the ability that the Bills reached out to the Panthers for Christian McCaffrey. And before we have our Colts or our Chiefs segment here at 7:00, I wanted to ask you, what are your opinions on that? Are you in the belief that a play? I mean, we talk about Odell Beckham Jr. a lot on this show. We'll table that for now. We're going to talk about Christian McCaffrey and the need of that position, as well as a slot receiver, as well as one of the best receiving backs in the league, mixed with the ability to improve that running room. Is that something that the Bills could use To me, it would be next week because that's your bye. The deadline's November 1st. You want to get the guy in the system and moving on all cylinders. So that would be something the next week or two that you would more than likely want to entertain. And the Bills have been shown, and Bean will tell you, he's tried for Von Miller. He tried for Emmanuel Sanders many years ago. He tried for Stephon Diggs before they traded for Stephon Diggs. If there's not smoke today, there's definitely smoke in the future of the offseason. But especially with the running backs who will no longer be on the roster, what's your opinion on Christian McCaffrey at the deadline and what he could do for this team? And to me, I would trade all 3 running backs on the roster for him. But what's your opinion on what's going to happen here? And if, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah, I think my answer is going to be predictable to you and anybody else who has watched us in the past. I'm 100% on board with the Bills trying to go after Christian McCaffrey. He's due a prorated $1 million. I think Greg Thompson was saying it would be something like $600,000 the Bills would owe him for the rest of this year, which is as cheap of a rental for a Pro Bowl caliber running back as you could possibly get. And then the next 3 years of his contract are non-guaranteed. So you could get out of the contract or try to restructure if he was willing to take a better deal. But I'm all for it. This is a team that is one of the best in the NFL right now. And if you have a chance to improve your roster, why not take a shot at it? Christian McCaffrey offers something that the Bills really do kind of lack in their backfield right now, and that's an elite pass-catching back. Devin Singletary gets a good amount of receptions, and he's decent. And I will never call out Devin Singletary for being a poor player. I think he's a good running back that does his job exactly what you want to do, get out of him in Buffalo. He finds holes. He's elusive. He catches the ball, and he can get you 5-6 yards per catch. But Christian McCaffrey is dynamic. You're talking about a back that had a season with where he had 1,300 yards rushing and 1,000 yards receiving. He has 2 100 reception seasons in his career, and he's only 26 years old. People act like he's on the wrong side of 30 and that he's been injured his whole career. He had 2 years where injuries really destroyed his seasons, and now he's been back on the field this year, and he's producing decently. He's not been at the high level we've become accustomed to, but how are you going to perform behind in Carolina with Baker Mayfield as your quarterback? So, yeah, I'm all for it. I think it's a great idea. And you add a guy like that, it's not just for the running game. You can put him in the slot. There's so many things that you can do. And as Greg has alluded to many times over the past couple of days, Christian McCaffrey is your dream scenario for James Cook. His ceiling isn't Christian McCaffrey. So you bring him in instantly day one, you're a better team. What do you give up for him? Probably a pair of picks. I'd probably guess a second, something else. And probably you got to make a move with one of your running backs. Got to get rid of Singletary, Cook, or Moss. One of them is going in this scenario. So, but in my opinion, definitely worth it to go for it.
Yeah, you see it all the time. A lot of people are like, there's no precedent in returning the player. Yeah, there is. Like, it happens all the time where just happened in the Russell Wilson trade where they took Drew Lock. Yes, teams are looking for young players back, especially with control. Singletary is the best of the group right now today. He needs a contract. Don't see that. Although he might present the best value for a win now team, I don't see them wanting him back in this scenario. There's really no purpose of cashing out your value on Devin Singletary if you're the Panthers, even though the Bills would say he's the best player in the room. We'd want the most value for him. I'd personally like to pair him with Christian McCaffrey for this run and maybe beyond. I don't believe Devin Singletary will command big money. I think he'll have a reasonable deal. Leonard Fournette keeps re-signing these deals. I don't believe he's going to have the statistics here. Singletary in his contract here, he already doesn't really to warrant a huge deal. I think he'd be great as a supplemental piece and going forward. So I do believe that leaves Cook and Moss. Will they be interested in a 2-year Moss? I don't know how much value they could have in it, as much as that's my ideal. Moss in a second or a third, that's ideal for me. I do believe that they'd be after someone in a replacement level like James Cook for him. I think that that's the player they could develop. They'd have him on a rookie deal for 4 years. I think that that'd be what they're looking for. And that might help limit the draft compensation back if you're able to give a second round pick in James Cook plus a third next year in the upcoming draft. I would do that today. James Cook in a third round pick. I would do that today over a second. And Moss, even though I prefer Cook, I do believe that the Bills would probably prefer to take the player who they're looking to develop. However, if you see a Cook in the third, Mike, I think that signals that it isn't just a rental. I think that the Bills would be interested in working on that contract. The Bills have an option for 3 for $36 million if they were to make a move for Christian McCaffrey, which is very reasonable. No guaranteed money. 12 a year, they could do something with that. That means cap coupons. You can immediately take that base salary and push it out over a 5-year deal and have a very reasonable contract. Brandon Beane is a genius at that kind of stuff. So I do believe that you're able to set that. And I wouldn't hate to cash out on James Cook today for a player that you're hoping he can be. The injury stuff around Christian McCaffrey is a joke. We've broken it down. Greg Thompson and others have stated that he's not injury prone. He has had some injuries. It's a big difference. He's played every single game of his career outside of those two, including in college. He's not an injured player. He had some injury unluckiness happen, but he's just such a dominant pass catcher. And he's exactly who this offense is built around. So it isn't far-fetched for me to take him on at $1 million this year, Mike. That is the silver lining. If he had to get 8, 7, 6, I just couldn't see it. But at $1 million this season and a very reasonable, non-guaranteed 3 for 36 it's not that outlandish that the Bills would be able to do something with both of those numbers.
The question is, will Carolina be willing to make a move? There's conflicting reports. Some say that they would be willing to move on from him, obviously with Matt Rule gone. Mm-hmm. But then you're also talking about the face of a franchise. Are they going to be willing to give him up for a second or third round pick? Maybe they're trying to get something more. Hard to see any team giving up a first round pick for a running back, even one as good as Christian McCaffrey. The tough part for Bills Mafia will be fans accepting Cook being a part of this deal. I think a lot of fans will struggle with that idea, especially with him being a second-round pick. I would do it because you know what you're getting back in return. As much as it would be great to just be a second, a fifth, and maybe throw in Moss, I think Carolina would struggle with that, selling that idea to their fan base. So it's just as much trying to find something that they can sell to their fans as what Buffalo gives them. Devin Singletary, I don't think he's going to be part of any of these trades either. I don't see Carolina wanting to trade for a running back that could leave them in a year and just get a pair of picks in return. And so it almost feels like it has to be James Cook.
Mike, I got a question for you, though. Something that can happen, and we have seen happen, is you make a deal with picks, and then you go and deal Singletary to a team who needs a running back on a 1-year deal to get back some compensation. Is that something you would see, or would you rather the Cook plus a pick route?
You know, my ideal scenario is that you're not trading any of those running backs. Well, obviously Moss would be the guy, but my ideal scenario is you're trading a second and a fifth, and then you just cut Moss or cut. Obviously, they're not going to cut Cook or cut Singletary. Right. So my ideal scenario would be you trade the 2 picks, and then you cut one of your running backs that you don't need. But will Carolina be good with that? Will they try to get rid of him? We'll see. I don't know if we really have a bunch of clarity right now about the situation. Some of the reports that the Bills have been in contact with Carolina, Dan Fates is one of them from out in Rochester, New York. But we haven't had any big national people yet.
Benjamin Albright's the closest we've had, who's been, for the sources people out there, people love him. He's one of the better guys.
Who are you saying?
Benjamin Albright from Denver.
Yeah, so he obviously said that didn't think it was likely, but if there was a team, probably would be the Bills. And then he also retweeted a Mike Florio article for Pro Football Talk where he was saying, normally this is part of the process. One team denies, another team denies, and then you have a trade a couple days later. So there might be something to this.
Smoke, there's fire, Mike. Just like with the OBJ stuff. And then Michael Balco, a guy from ESPN, featured on ESPN Rivals USA Today, has also said that the Bills have been in constant contact with the with the Panthers for Christian McCaffrey. So I do believe that he can't be part of the plan. I do think that they would need to cash out his value today. They're able to probably get more from a team looking to make a push than they will in the offseason when he would need a new contract. So that the $1 million or less contract he has for the rest of the year is what gives him a little bit more value than trading for 3 for 36. And either Christian not liking that or the team not liking, there's just more uncertainty this offseason. So I think his maximum value is right now And I do think you see him dealt. You see it across all of other sports where teams are like, yeah, we're going to build around Trey Turner in baseball. The next thing you know, Trey Turner's going to the Dodgers. So it's just a matter of, I think rebuilding teams do this. And I think they do it quite frankly. Von Miller has been traded in the past at the deadline, a bigger name deal from Denver, who he was with for a long time. And the trade deadline has been a little bit more active lately than we have seen in years past. So I do think that that you see some Panthers player being dealt. It's too obvious. A new regime can start over, a new coaching staff with a bunch of picks. I think it's very likely that you see him dealt somewhere. And I think you maximize the value pinning winning teams against each other today, rather than the offseason when they're like, well, we can reflect, we can use the draft, we can sign free agents, we can do other things. I think that his maximum value might be today, outside of just a monster year this year or something with a bad team. I just don't think he can increase his value much.
And what's he going to do in the upcoming years in Carolina on a rebuilding roster? Right. The Panthers aren't going anywhere, and
no,
they're a complete mess. And the one thing I do love about this idea, it's not even him improving the running game, because I think that's more so going to be a result of the Bills' offensive line improving during the course of the season. Right now, the run blocking is horrible. No one is going to get much yardage behind that offensive line rushing the ball. And McCaffrey, as we saw in Carolina right now, I think he's only averaging 3.7 yards per carry. So it's not like he's lighting it up from a yards per carry standpoint. I'm just so excited about what he can add to the passing game. This offense, quite frankly, they don't even need him. And they don't need Odell Beckham Jr. either. We want both of them. Obviously, it's not likely to get both, but I definitely think there's a shot at getting one or the other. And it's the fact that you can never, as we said during the offseason, you can never have too many weapons. You're always an injury away from being put in a poor situation. And I love McCaffrey because I think he makes your passing game almost unstoppable at times. You have that check down option, but you also have the ability to put him in the slot. Devin Singletary, as we said, he'll make the receptions. He'll get 5-6 yards, but he doesn't really offer a ton of dynamic playmaking ability once he gets the ball. He's a good player, but he doesn't have elite skill set. Christian McCaffrey, you dump it off 5 yards, he could break a tackle. Next thing you know, he's taking it 35 yards. He has just a unique ability that not many players in the NFL have. And you already have an offense that has playmakers at every position, at wideout, tight end. You had a pass catching running back to the table like that. It could be really interesting. I think we're all hoping that James Cook was going to be a little bit more polished early on, but as we've seen, it takes time for that to happen. And hopefully, if the Bills don't make this move, James Cook will get closer to that guy by the time the playoffs get here. But if you make a deal that you are getting that guy if you get McCaffrey to join the Bills.
And the Going Deep podcast here, we're in the first half an hour talking Christian McCaffrey here, Kevin Masseri, Mike Bunt on the Cover One Podcast Network. We have Ron Kopp Jr. coming in from Arrowhead Pride here in 5 minutes, so stay tuned for a crossover 30 minutes. And we'll get into the Chiefs game a little bit more, but wanted to make time to talk Christian McCaffrey, as I think that there's smoke, that there's fire. We spent a lot of time on this show talking about adding to the offense and adding weapons, as we did all offseason. We had a whole edition on weapons for Josh Allen. Khalil Shakir was the option. James Cook was the option that came in. Khalil Shakir has shown to be a true slot receiver and a true upgrade to the team. I don't think you can take him off the field, Mike. So as we talk weapons, right before Ron comes in from the Arrowhead Pride, do you believe that Shakir should see the majority of snaps as the third receiver going forward with the Jamison Crowder injury? I think he did it with Christian Benford. He gave him the job. Obviously he's hurt, but he should be back after the bye. What's your opinion on, should Khalil Shakir be the weapon right now? And does that ease a little bit toward the Christian McCaffrey idea? Because you can't play Shakir. Some of the snaps of McCaffrey would be the ones you were looking to give Odell Beckham Jr. Although I do think that they do affect each other. As much as I'm the number one guy that's like, weapons. I don't think there's any realistic chance they could go with both. So talk to me real quickly here for a couple of minutes. Khalil Shakir, did he win the job going forward? I mean, I don't know how you watch his film and think he's not the Bills receiver 3.
I don't know if he wins the job based on the coaching staff and how they evaluate players, because obviously McKenzie was the clear number 3, even ahead of Jamison Crowder after camp. But I think it's clear that it's eventually going to be his job, if not very soon, sooner than later. Khalil Shakir has been just doing fantastic since the moment the Bills took him in the draft. All of training camp, making plays, preseason was dynamic. And then now you're starting to see it in regular season games, stepping up to the challenge. So it will be his job at some point. I just don't know if it's right away or if maybe it's the end of the year. I still think the Bills value McKenzie. They like the speed element that he brings and some of the gadget stuff that he's capable of doing. So when McKenzie is able to return from concussion protocol, maybe he has that 3 job. But I don't think it's something where Khalil Shakir is going to be benched or inactive anymore. I think Shakir is a player that you have to see on the field going forward. And regardless of if he's your 3 or your number 4, he's going to be one of those guys the Bills offense will rely on. And good reason. I mean, 5th round pick, but easily could have been a 2nd or a 3rd round pick. And Bills, as we said all offseason, they lucked out with him. This is a guy that's going to be an impact player for them going forward.
And as we see the RAS score, again, we revisit this every couple of months, an elite 8 score, which is really good, an elite speed grade, 40-yard dash is there, 20 and 10-yard splits are there, as we see in his breaks and his ability to get open in the seam. Josh Allen trusted a rookie. I don't want to say it was a big game, but it was a big moment.
The first
down the seam in triple coverage.
Yeah.
Like a rookie in triple coverage, great throw, better route in this case. Insane. Like to trust him in that moment when you have Gabriel Davis ripping it up and you have your guy Stephon Diggs on the boundary, and you trust Khalil Shakir down the seam against Minkah Fitzpatrick. It shows me that I don't know that Josh Allen's going to request him off the field. You're still going to have your Isaiah McKenzie packages like you always do. He's still going to be receiver 4, and he kind of thrives in receiver 3.5, receiver 4 roles, as he has all season. An injury happens, McKenzie's back in pretty quickly. I just don't think you can take Khalil Shakir off the field.
He's being groomed to be the 3. That's his role.
You can't start Christian Benford as a 6th-round pick and tell me that Khalil Shakir hasn't earned the job and the trust of Josh Allen when he's getting down the seam, triple cover passes. I'm sorry. I just don't buy it that he hasn't earned the job.
What will be interesting, though, is, like you said, if OBJ is a person that does eventually sign with the Bills, what are you doing with your wide receiver room? Does McKenzie suddenly – is he no longer part of your offense, assuming a healthy OBJ in the playoffs? In that scenario, is McKenzie the 5 and Shakir the 4? There's a lot of different things that can happen. That's a long ways away, though.
Yeah, and as we kind of wrap up this point here, Von Miller did pretty much say that he is leaking that Odell Beckham Jr. will sign with the Bills.
We'll see. We'll see.
Well, I don't know. It's really bold to say that. He did recruit the punter over, just a punter. But, for lack of a better term, I believe truly that where there's smoke, there's fire with OBJ. It is going to end up being his pick. And then the interesting discussion around Christian McCaffrey is going to continue on until either they shut down everything or they dish him somewhere. So it's going to be an interesting discussion as one of the Bills' biggest needs in the offseason, with the lack of players under contract next year. It's going to be a topic of discussion, at least for the next 3 weeks. But it's the 7:00 hour. Like we promised, we have a special guest coming on over to talk Chiefs in a crossover edition to really get their perspective on not only this week, but what happened yesterday, what exactly went right, what didn't go right. Very interesting game against the Raiders yesterday. So we're going to welcome in Ron Kopp Jr. from Arrowhead Pride to talk Chiefs crossover edition and really break down what he's seeing over the next 30 minutes. So enough hypothetical Bills third options and more talk about upcoming games, which is probably more important at this stage. Ron, thanks for coming on the show.
Man, thanks for having me. Appreciate you having me. I do think it's funny. This is the first time I'm kind of talking about this game since we just had the Chiefs Raiders game last night. I'm still kind of, doing a little review of that, still trying to, but it's one of those weeks where you do turn around quickly because of how important this game is, man. I'm excited. I'm pumped.
Yeah, and the Bills had to do the same. They luckily didn't really have much of a competition on Sunday afternoon, so they were able to turn the page pretty quickly sometime yesterday. And most Bills fans were probably already on to the Chiefs fairly quickly on Monday morning, because the Steelers just might be one of the worst teams in the league. I mean, they really are pretty poor, which is weird to say from a Tomlin coach team.
Right.
But Ron, give us a quick breakdown on yesterday. I think Bills fans were obviously watching that. Tell us what was going on, what happened in that first half. They always put it together with Patrick Mahomes. The Bills have a similar ability to do so with Josh Allen, but tell us, I mean, Josh just had his biggest comeback and one of his better performances against the Ravens 2 weeks ago. So tell us what happened, the Raiders, what they're doing at the end of the game there. I mean, how are you feeling after that game? Really narrow victory with them missing a going for two
right
to end the game.
Yeah, right. Well, no, you mentioned the Josh Allen comeback. Hey, both 17-point comebacks, kind of both games where, both offenses just started out really sluggish. And that was the thing with the Chiefs game last night. I wasn't too surprised with how we kind of saw the defense maybe come out right away. With the way the Chiefs cornerbacks are right now, a young group outside of L'Jarius Sneed, but in those nickel packages, he's in the slot. So those outside cornerbacks are really, able to be taken advantage of right now. And so that's why I wasn't really surprised to see the Raiders go right at him with Devontae Adams right away, gets the DPI as well on a few of those. So, yeah, so I think that was kind of the main theme on the defense was I wasn't too surprised to see kind of the Raiders go after that and have success with it a little bit. I just didn't expect the offense to start as slow. Now, the Chiefs do have a problem with, sometimes it feels like their game plans are a little conservative depending on the game. You watch them play against the Colts in week 3, and then the next week they play like that against the Bucs. That is pretty common around here. I mean, they do tend to kind of ebb and flow with the game plans. And I just didn't really think, that would be the case against the Raiders, right? It's a really big game. But it did seem like the game plan right away, right out the gate, that first 15 for the offense just wasn't effective. The offensive tackles were getting beat by Max Crosby and Chandler Jones. Both tackles were having to struggle, but eventually the offense did settle down. Patrick Mahomes began to help them a lot with his pocket management. The play calling got a lot better, kind of scheming around, getting more chip help and everything. And that's when the offense really started to groove. I think the Raiders were really, taking a lot of attention in their coverage towards Kelsey. They really were before the 20-yard line. But that's what was opening up some of those chunk plays you saw from MVS and even McCole Hardman got involved with those. But as soon as they got in the red zone, that's where Mahomes and Kelsey just, they just overcome any sort of, resistance to their connection. But yeah, no. And then you come down to the end of the game, it's a tight game. Obviously that, great throw and catch, Derek Carr to Devontae Adams at the very end. I mean, just unbelievable play there, at that with 4 minutes left. But I really would have liked to see Andy be a little more aggressive on 4th down there. I get it's a kind of a tight situation, but he elects to punt it on 4th and 2 and give the Raiders the ball back. But
does he punt that to Josh Allen there? Because I don't think he does.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think you're 100% right there. Even if his defense because that's the thing, the defense wasn't really playing well against Derek Carr either. So you'd say, hey, if the defense isn't playing well against any quarterback, but I do think you're right. I think he had a little more confidence that Derek Carr may not go 93 yards to win the game, although he did just need a field goal. But all that to say is, I think Andy was a little conservative. I think they tend to do that when they kind of maybe underestimate the opponent a little bit, even if it's a divisional game. But that is not going to be the case this game. I definitely expect coming forward to see a much more focused game plan, kind of like you saw against Tampa Bay, just a much more aggressive attacking game plan on offense than you saw against the Raiders.
What are the vibes around this Chiefs team right now? Obviously, for the last 4 years, they've been the team to beat in the AFC. And then during the offseason, the Bills get anointed by the national media, the general public, as the Super Bowl favorites, having lost at Arrowhead in their last appearance. And it's a 50-50 either way. Who do you want to call the favorite? They're both great. I think most people believe it's going to be either the Bills or the Chiefs that win the Super Bowl this year. But it was kind of an offseason where the Chiefs were overlooked. People talked about how great the AFC West was, the Chargers being the up-and-coming team, maybe Denver. And now we're here at week 6, and it looks like the AFC West is clearly the Chiefs division. a couple tough games with the Raiders, the Colts, and then obviously a nice comeback against the Chargers. Where do you feel like this team is at right now? And does the fan base feel slighted at all by all the, I guess, publicity that the Bills have been receiving through the first half of the season so far?
Yeah, I think the fans are always gonna feel like that a little bit. I do think it was. I felt like it was justified. I'll be honest. I do think the Chiefs and Bills were so tight, so close teams, and obviously, the Bills didn't do anything necessarily last year to lose that playoff game, right? Obviously the defense could have held at the end, but it's always funny to me. It's like Josh Allen was literally perfect in last year's playoffs, and it's just how it works in when in this crazy times, I guess, with these offenses. But to get back to it, it's just I do think looking into this season how they've kind of performed, and yes, they are 4-1, but I do think compared to when you're talking about how confident you are in the team to be the best version of themselves, we haven't seen that from the Chiefs yet at all. And honestly, we've seen quite a bit of struggles from the new pass catching group. I know it's kind of been, we see the Bucs game and obviously last night, and so a lot of the national media is like, oh well, no Tyreek, no problem. I do think in a game like this one coming up against the Bills and in other games where they play tough defenses, I think I'm really interested to see that challenge. I think the Bucs defense, to be honest with you guys, I just don't think they kind of came out and just played kind of lackadaisical. I mean, I don't think they really gave the Chiefs that great of a game. I really want to see this team get challenged by a really great defense, and one that's going to maybe take Kelsey away a little more. My main point with that is just that this offense has still struggled at times and still hasn't been as good as it can be at times. The offensive line has gone through spurts of sometimes they look very good and sometimes it looks like they can't block anybody. It has been an up and down season. It's just, they're 4-1, and it's funny, if they didn't have a few special teams miscues in Indianapolis, they're probably 5-0. But it is not it has been an imperfect start. The Bucs game was really the highlight, but we've seen a lot of with the changeover from last year, even on defense too. I've been impressed with how the defense has started this year, a lot of newcomers, but they definitely have still, had some flaws, obviously in the secondary, letting some big pass plays go, even against the Chargers in week 2, Mike Williams really took them, to the woodshed to an extent. So all that to say is I think this team, this 4-1 team, is a testament to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid being a great quarterback and coach combo. I think they still have a long way to go to improve to be that Super Bowl contender they have been with, when they were 2019, 2020, kind of in their prime version of that team. I still think they have a ways to go to kind of match that level of team. So it's just all that to say is the Tyreek, no Tyreek, no problem. I still think there's some room to prove that, they got to get better from that.
Is that something? So obviously they do have some work to do. Every team has work to do at the week 6 point of the season. Do you think this is a Chiefs team that needs that big challenge to, I guess, I don't want to say motivated. Obviously they're motivated, but to get the best version of themselves, they need to have that bigger opponent to have that top performance? Because I know just watching the Chiefs throughout the last few years, you'd watch them play some lower, lesser teams at times, right, and you just be like, what is this? And then they come back, they win. They always find a way to win. But then they would play the Bills or some other top team, and you just be like, Jesus, like how do we stop these guys? And I guess that's what I'm curious to see on Sunday. Are the Chiefs going to come out firing and do things to this Bills defense that they haven't seen since the last time they played Kansas City? Or are they going to have some struggles against a Bills team that's been on fire in recent weeks?
Right. Well, I think ideally, I do think they do have going to have an A game plan. I think the Bucs game is a good example of that, of when, they're a betting underdog, because they were underdogs, and they're underdogs in this game, right? Even at home, they are the betting underdog. I think that mentality a little bit, soaks into the coaches and even Mahomes. So I do think they get locked in for those big games, like you mentioned. So I anticipate that for sure. I really do. But we have also seen them, come out in big games and get down, 10, 17, nothing. They've come back in those opportunities a lot of the time. Last year against the Bills at home in the regular season, they did not. And so that's where I do think, I anticipate them wanting to have an A game plan, but that doesn't always go exactly how they want to, right? So that's where I'm excited to see them. I mentioned the Bucs defense again. I just feel like I feel like they didn't, I feel like they didn't challenge the Chiefs that much. I really feel like it wasn't that great of a game from them. And so I'm anticipating better from the Bills defense. So I'm excited to see that challenge.
Yeah, and as you look at some of the numbers I wanted to bring up to you and kind of get your opinions, Mahomes yard per attempt, 7.5 last year, 7.4 this year. Allen, 7.1, 8.1 this year, a full yard upgrade. Yak, another big one. This could go to the receiver, the pass catcher. The Bills focal on getting Yak, and maybe the Chiefs losing Tyreek Hill. But fourth in Yak, 753 yards this season for the Bills, compared to the Chiefs dropping all the way down to 19th at 565. I know it's only been 5 games. But those are some very interesting statistics when the Chiefs were third in the league and the Bills are dead last year in the Yak. So some early quarterback advanced statistics that are pretty interesting to me, and leads me to my question, which is what's going on life after Tyreek Hill? We talked about it a little bit. PFF, I use them unbiasedly. They're not God. They're not perfect.
Yeah.
Does not like your receiving core. Are they right? Are they wrong? I like Sky Moore a lot. Mike can attest to the fact that I thought that he was the Bills' second round pick. I thought he was perfectly what they were looking to upgrade Yak and to upgrade some of the things they were looking for. And of course, the Chiefs went in there and selected him. I'll never know if the Bills actually liked him. They had him in pre-draft visits, potentially would have been a second round pick. But much like Cook has, the Bills' second round choice, has had a slow start. Even though he's probably, per his advanced statistics, looks good in yards per route. He looks good in his PFF score. He looks good in his ability to get open. So talk to me about, someone like Juju Smith-Schuster, who by all accounts is having a poor year, and Sky Moore, in my opinion, who should be playing more. The Bills have their own version of this in Khalil Shakir, who has played really, really well and should by all accounts. Before you came on, we talked about him taking the receiver 3 job away as early as this week. Break down the receiver room and its lapses to this point and Josh Allen's had this struggle in years past with some of his receivers. So talk to me about, how is Patrick Mahomes adjusting to this, and what's your opinion on all of that?
Well, the truth, or the fact that the receiver depth has gotten better and it's just not as top heavy is true. That is true. The Chiefs had, too many snaps of Byron Pringle and Demarcus Robinson over the last few years. And so, the mix of Juju Smith-Schuster, MVS, and McCole Hardman, none of them are really taking over as wide receiver 1. MVS just had more targets than Juju this last game. And so I don't think, Juju kind of was the assumed wide receiver 1 coming into the season. We assumed so here in Kansas City as well. And it's just kind of been a mix. So all that to say, the depth has definitely improved. And you can see that, the second, third options are a little better with what they've had. But where they've struggled this year is getting somebody when they really need to get open against man coverage. And because defenses are testing the Chiefs with more man coverage this year, obviously, because you don't have Tyreek Hill, they're not as worried. Hey, there could be a 70-yard bomb on any play if we're playing man coverage on, to an extent. That's not the same thing. McCole Hardman does not have that same big play ability, even if he's fast. He doesn't have that same threat. He's just not the receiver to take advantage of coverages like that. So I do think the big weakness of their group this year, and it's the most important thing a receiver room needs, is, and I'm talking the wide receivers specifically, is someone that can go win on a route, separate and get open for Mahomes on a 3rd and 7, or even just any sort of 2-minute drill where they really need a big play. A lot of times when the receivers have made plays this year, it has either been a very, very good throw to a receiver in tight coverage, or Andy Reid schemed them open on a great design, kind of, pushing routes around and getting them open in space. So that's where Sky Moore comes in. And I'm glad you brought him up. We're not crazy here. I think some of us in Kansas City are like, why isn't he playing more? And I'm glad to hear, other draft people saw him in the pre-draft and understand what kind of player he is. The fact that he can create separation, in tight coverage. He does have great releases off the line to maybe create that quick separation. And we saw that in training camp, actually, directly compared to who Juju, MVS, when they're running through their routes, even McCole, Sky's releases, Sky's just routes were noticeably just more impressive. It really was. And so we know it's coming. They did force feed him the ball a little more in Tampa. And then I honestly kind of thought we might see a breakout game against the Raiders, but then we kind of didn't see him until the very end of the 4th quarter. Then all of a sudden they trust him to get a few really big plays, really clutch catches, which, could be a good sign that they give him that situation. But, to just to wrap up the point, the receivers definitely have some work to do. And the most obvious answer to me for the receiver room to just get better, just be a better overall group this year, is just for Sky to play more. No one's taken over the wide receiver one targets anyway. They might as well be a very balanced group and just let Moore eat into that pie of the receiver room just a little more than he has so far this year. And I think we'll see that as the season goes. And it does seem like it's getting a little more and more and more, but I wouldn't anticipate him being a feature part of the offense this game unless they throw some crazy changeup. It's not there yet, I don't think.
A big talk in the offseason was that the Chiefs finally had an offensive line where they felt like they could run the ball more effectively. Has that been something that you have seen to this point? And is the run game something that needs to be taken seriously going forward?
The offensive line is very spotty, and it starts with their tackles. I think you have two average tackles, which in today in the NFL, you want average tackles, right? You want the best of the best, but you can only ask for so much. You just can't have bad tackles. And so some games it looks really good. Some games it's the whole offensive line's gelling. You see it against the Bucs, all of a sudden, and you guys have seen it even, a couple of years ago. I know it's not the same line, but it's kind of how the Chiefs offensive line has always been, not full of, they do have talent in the interior this year, but in terms of the offensive tackles, I just think they have average guys. And I think we've seen it when they face upper talent, when it's the Raiders, Max Crosby and Chandler Jones, the Chargers, Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, even the Colts when they brought in, DeForest Buckner and Yannick Ngakoue, even though they, aren't in their primes necessarily as much as they used to be. They have struggled against the top talent, and that's where Von Miller definitely isn't a great thing to hear coming into town this week. And that's kind of one of those things, talking about the Bills. Last year they didn't have that top tier pass rusher, and that might have been that one key thing missing in that Chiefs divisional round game. Well, if you guys did have him, I would imagine he would have got to Mahomes a few times based on how Brown and Wiley have played this year. So pass protection has been very spotty. And then you mentioned the run game. They have the guys. Brown is a really good run blocker. They have the talent. It just seems like the scheme sometimes does not allow that talent to really be at its best, right? They run a lot of outside zone from shotgun. They run a lot of just basic inside zone concepts with the RPO tag. And so all of a sudden, the offensive line isn't getting its the momentum moving forward and getting any push. The Chiefs, and when they do go downhill, it looks a lot better. The Bucs game, there was a lot more downhill running from under center. I could see that being the case this week. I could see them making that a bigger part of their game plan again. And then you're weaponizing the line more, but I don't think the run game is this big part of the plan that they want to feature in the offense. I think it's really just, and it's always been like this, but it's really just a way to get from one pass play to the other, without passing every time. That's how they've always treated the run game. And so I see that continuing. I thought there might be a difference without Tyreek this year, but that's just how Andy runs his offense. Again, though, single game plans, they could bring out more of a downhill run game like they did against the Bucs. I could see that happening this week for sure.
And we'll transition to defense in a moment here and how you guys are going to try to stop Josh Allen. I love the point you brought up about the offensive line and some of the struggles. Max Crosby was getting to Mahomes last night, and the Raiders were really causing some issues early in that contest. The Bills have prioritized revamping their defensive front and not just adding Von Miller as an edge, bringing guys like Daquan Jones, obviously Jordan Phillips and Tim Settle. And it's been probably the most improved part of the Bills is just improving their D-line from all aspects, stopping the run, and definitely getting the pass rush. And PFF grades, I know we joke about them. They seem to agree with that, with the Bills having one of the best pass rush grades in the NFL. To me, that was the big difference in recent matchups was the Bills just had no answer to get to Mahomes. And it didn't matter if they got hurries or pressures. Mahomes was able to evade it and make plays. Is there concern as someone that has watched the Chiefs struggle at times this year with their protection, going up against a Von Miller and a Bills defense that has been great for most of the recent years, but just hasn't been able to really step up against the Chiefs offense? Does it bring more fear now that they have some of these new guys in their defensive line overall?
Absolutely. And I don't know if I hammered the point home earlier about, how I honestly I accepted the Bills as a favorite in this offseason. And mainly it's because, like you mentioned, adding Von Miller to a defensive line that was already deep. You guys are, I know you added a few other pieces this year as well. Those were two other names that had definitely made an impact, but you guys always had a very, good rotation where, even if that second wave's coming in, they're still making an impact. And, I think that has given the Chiefs trouble to an extent at times. I think in the playoff game last year, it was just, I think, Mahomes just being Mahomes, more than anything. But, in that regular season game last year, you saw it. But adding Von Miller, that top tier rusher, that guy on third down that you have to be fearful of as an offense, really no matter who you are, but especially when you have the offensive tackles that the Chiefs do, and especially Orlando Brown Jr. I mean, that guy speed rushes, guys that can really bend. That is not what he is good at stopping, man. He wants to see those big power rushers because he can match their power, right? A guy like Von Miller is really going to give him fits. I would imagine the Bills, keep him over the left tackle most of the game. I would think that's smart. But, yeah, I think it's a huge part of this game. The Chiefs are going to have to game plan around it, and that is probably why they'll run, be running a lot more just to kind of, protect Pat in the passing game from those negative plays. But it's going to be a big deal, man. They're definitely going to be keen in on how to stop Von, and there's not really a great way to do it. So,
yeah, Mike, as Mike mentioned, the Bills' run defense is as well improved as anything this offseason. We all talk about the pass rush. The Bills struggled to stop the run in McDermott's tenure. He'll tell you it's been poor. That they're very good against pass defense. They're very good in with their defensive schemes, their cover two looks, their mush rushes, and all different type of scenarios. But they've struggled since McDermott has been here, and he's now one of the winningest coaches in Buffalo football history. But he's struggled to stop the run in every season, good, bad, medium years. He struggled with a big Colts game, this has prevented the Bills, even with a Chiefs victory last year. It's prevented them from being the number one seed and almost single-handedly with the run defense. And this year couldn't be any different. They absolutely got rid of the demons of Derrick Henry. They absolutely exercised anything Baltimore was trying to do, running the ball. They always do fairly well against a running quarterback, but even better this time around, and they couldn't get off. They couldn't run the ball at all. Najee Harris, 12 carries for 20 yards, couldn't get going at all. So the Bills have done really, really well against the run this season, almost better than against the pass. But the fact of the matter is they've been very strong. 7 points allowed in the second half total in 5 games, none in the third quarter. So the couple of big bugaboos the Bills got rid of were stopping the run. Defensive adjustments always struggled in the third quarter under McDermott, pretty much until the AFC divisional game against the Chiefs. They had struggled in the third quarter until that Gabe Davis long touchdown. It kind of sparked them in this third quarter rebirth that you've seen last since then. So a couple of big nuggets that go the Bills' way in stopping the run. And we don't really know which players the Bills, will they treat this like a playoff game? Will you see Jordan Poyer? Will you see Tremaine Edmonds? The Bills have been doing it without 3, and Trey White and Micah Hyde, 4 of their top 7 defensive players.
Secondary has just been – it's amazing that they've played as well as they have. They've been missing half.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense how Dane Jackson.
But that's also a concern, though. Chiefs offense.
Yeah.
Got Mahomes. You're going to be having Dane Jackson –
you saw him expose it last year. I mean, the start of the Bills DBs were last year with Levi Wallace being just a horrific football player, and having he still sucks. The Bills totally targeted him last week against the Steelers, regardless of what Ken Dorsey says. The Bills, he was asked if he targeted Levi Wallace, and he said,
"Oh
no,
wow,
but
that's funny."
But I guess it's up to you to believe he did target him the majority of the game. And then Dane Jackson, who's a 7th-round rookie a couple years ago now, and who has played very well. And Christian Benford just took the world by storm, kind of like, you see with a 7th-round draft choice in Kansas City in the defensive backfield. But Christian Benford has been a revelation, broke his hand, shouldn't be back until after the bye. Kaiir Elam's been pretty good in stretches, but lost his job to a 6th-round pick. So that's kind of some funny notes. And Trey White, we still don't know what's going on with Trey. Is he a week out? Is he 4 weeks out? We really have no idea at this stage. And Jordan Poyer has been as good as ever. So a lot of going on in the Bills' defensive backfield. But the one thing we trust McDermott to do, Ron, is coach the defensive backs. So that's the number one thing we think he does strong in good years, bad years, and anything in between. You're going to get a really good defensive back scheme. His cover 2 is great. He runs a little bit of man in there, and they run pretty good schemes. Outside of literally one pass this season on a 3rd and 23 against Tua on Jalen Waddle, beat 4 backup defensive backs. They've been very, very good in every situation throwing the ball. So that's a testament to McDermott and what he's able to build defensively. And I'm really interested in this game. I'm really interested to see who they play, because the Bills could do anything from resting these guys again and taking the bye and saying it's just another regular season game to playing their entire roster outside of Micah Hyde. So where do you stand on that? Talk to me about the Chiefs' injury status. Is there any concerns? They seem fairly healthy outside of a suspension. They seem fairly healthy. Anything happened last night?
Well, there was a pretty big impact for the pass rush, I will say. An underrated impact for non-Chiefs fans. Tershawn Wharton is really their go-to, that second interior rusher in the third down packages, their dime defense alongside Chris Jones. He is really a kind of a spark plug in terms of just he can get in and make a play. He tore his ACL last night. I'm burying the lead a little bit. So we do not have him anymore, unfortunately. They're looking to get back Mike Dana, another rotational defensive lineman. First-round rookie cornerback Trent McDuffie, who, you mentioned Kyer Elam. I was someone that was very high on Elam going into the draft. I never really considered the Chiefs would get McDuffie, so I didn't really ever compare the two. And so it's just kind of funny that, you guys got my guy, but I don't think I haven't seen much of McDuffie. Eddie got injured, week 1, and we haven't seen him since. So we don't know exactly what we have in him yet, but he did not get targeted in the time he did play in week 1. But he is eligible to return off the IR this week, and we don't know for sure if he will. It was a hamstring injury, so there is a chance, right? You just give that time, about a month, and he could be good. But yeah, outside of that, the Chiefs' offense is definitely healthy. It is healthy. Trey Smith, I think, was held out of last night's game, the right guard, pretty much just to get 100%. He could have played. He was questionable. I think they do have a quality backup guard in Nick Allegretti, who didn't play great last night, but he's a backup guard. And they trust him. So they'll have Trey Smith back for this game. They should be fully healthy on offense. Defense is dealing with stuff. You mentioned the Willie Gay Jr. suspension. I really wish he was back for this game. He's a huge part of stopping Josh Allen and the scrambling and even just, these quick passes. They were really starting to just stay in their nickel formation a lot more this year, keep Bolton and Gay on the field. Now without Gay, they're really starting to go back to their dime defense, which I think it can be exploitable at sometimes. I think Spagnuolo's a little too, finesse with those dime packages sometimes. But all that to say, I think it should be we're relatively healthy on our side, not what you guys are dealing with. You guys are dealing with a ton
it's valuable snaps, Ron. I like to say the Bills have been very healthy, almost exclusively under McDermott, to the point where losing Trey White at the end of the year was the biggest thing they've had in years. Yeah. They invest a lot of money in their training facilities. They're very cautious. They've had very limited, I think usually lead the league in starter games lost, and that's part of their success. But this year has been interesting to me to show these guys are getting huge snaps for the development of their as a player, as well as their ability to step in big games like we might see in the playoffs this year. So it's an interesting thing, whereas I'd like to have the Bills full strength against the Chiefs, but generally it hasn't bugged me too much to where a lot of guys are getting really big time snaps and really could really help the roster out as you develop. So it's been interesting for Bills fan. We've never really had a ton of injuries, but it's been fair to say I want him back this week, but I don't know that McDermott agrees.
Well, it is funny though. I think usually when an elite team like a Bills and they have a bunch of injuries and stuff, I think you see a couple losses. It's usually a good excuse for fans, but also the national media be like, oh, they're dealing with injuries. It just might not be their year. You don't hear that at all, even though they're dealing with a ton of injuries, because they're still so dominant, playing so well. The Bills or the Dolphins loss was just. You kind of look at the box score of that and scratch your head. How did they lose that game? How did they have less points than the other team when you look at the yardage totals and the time of possession? So I don't know. Yeah, I think it's been really impressive. I have the Bills as the best team in the league. We do power rankings at Arrowhead Pride every year or every week. So I am definitely willing to admit that, the Chiefs are deserving underdogs right now, even if it is at home. And I'm excited for the game for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. As we come to the top of the half an hour here, we appreciate you making 30 minutes for us. It's going to be a wild game. We'll see if the line moves much at all, 1 to 2.5. We'll see what happens in here with the line, as there's a lot to look forward to in one of the better early season, regular season games that you can possibly have. And I still believe it'll mean a lot to the standings. And I do believe both teams will take this very seriously. And I do think you'll see the Chiefs play some guys and the Bills play some players that maybe would have sat against the Steelers. So especially with the bye behind the game here for the Bills. So Ron, I got to ask you, we ask everybody, give us a score prediction. What do you see happening on Sunday? You take it wherever you want. You can take a Chiefs win. You could take a, blowout either way. What do you realistically, coming off of a 6-day weekend, what do you see happening on Sunday at 4?
Yeah, well, again, I'm telling you, this is the first time I've kind of been able to talk about this game. So it's the first time my prediction juices are flowing. Just because what we saw in week 4 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Chiefs coming out, with an aggressive game plan. Now they did get, they had some things go their way. The opening kickoff was fumbled. That's a huge, momentum swing to start out a game. It just did feel like they really got up for that game. And I don't see why they wouldn't get up for this game. I could see why there could be a letdown between those two games with the Raiders, a little bit an effort letdown, which I do think you saw on Monday night. I think they get up for this game. I think they defend home field. You guys just got to host one of these, and then maybe you can take one. I mean, it's just ridiculous that we keep playing in Arrowhead. I almost want you guys to host
next year's in Arrowhead too, just so you know.
Ridiculous. Anyway, I'm gonna give the home team the advantage. I think the Chiefs pull this out. A+ game plan. I'm just mentioned that you guys don't have the haven't been using the injury excuse, but I do think you guys are banged up in the secondary. I think Mahomes and the receiving core, to an extent, can take advantage of that. I'm curious to see how Travis Kelce, gets handled, but overall, I think it's gonna be a shootout. I definitely see, I see our defense having a very tough time. So I'm going to go Chiefs. I'm going to go Chiefs 38, Bills 35.
Okay. To wrap up the show, Mike, we'll bounce it to you. What do you got going on briefly in score prediction?
So until the Bills beat the Chiefs in a game that means something, it's hard for me to pick the Bills over Kansas City. I know Buffalo won the regular season game last year on Sunday night. I still give a slight edge to Kansas City being the home team. I like Mahomes going up against a secondary that does have some inexperience. I know the Bills youngsters have been balling. I know that they've done a great job against other solid offenses this year. They haven't played Patrick Mahomes. Andy Reid is one of the best game planners in the entire NFL. I'm picking Kansas City 34-31. My view is this. I think if you just look at all the rosters in the NFL, I truly believe the Bills are the best team in football. If you were just looking at just what they have on offense, defense, talent-wise. Because I don't have a ton of trust in the Chiefs defense compared to the Bills defense. But when you have an offense like Kansas City, it's almost impossible for the Bills defense to hold them down for 60 minutes. And in those shootout type games, you have to be equally perfect. And for that reason, I think Kansas City is just a tough matchup. And I still, even thinking the Bills are the better team overall, I think Kansas City has the edge.
Okay, there you go.
If that makes any sense. I know that's a lot of crazy.
Oh, no. I mean, I think that the injuries, that's why Friday could be a little bit easier. I mean, there are some big names. You're not talking about the backup left tackle. You got some big names on the Bills injury report. I just think this game means a lot to the Bills. I have them winning this game. I did preseason too, so it isn't something that I felt just off of some emotion off of a couple of games. I think they played well in the regular season. Sean McDermott's 2-0 in Arrowhead in the regular season. So I think that they can get up for it. And you're right, though. They do need to win when it matters. If this is a playoff game, I'm not sure. They do need to win best on best, coaching staff on coaching staff when it matters. I think that they showed last year they can win in the regular season. If the Chiefs play like they did yesterday, I do believe the Bills win. So I do think the Chiefs need a little bit better of a performance than that. No doubt. That's all I have in my head right now. I think the Bills win 35-31.
Kevin, the comments are coming after me.
I mean,
they think I'm scared. I am scared. You know, you can respect the Bills while also giving Kansas City
Mike is scared. I like that one.
You know what? The way I look at it is Kansas City has gone to 2 of the last 4 Super Bowls.
It's true.
Could be 3 of the last 4. And they've gone to the AFC Championship 4 years in a row. We're talking about one of the greatest teams over a 4 or 5 year period in the history of the NFL. And yeah, they don't have Tyreek anymore. But if they didn't blow the one Super Bowl to Tampa Bay because they just did not show up for that game, you're talking about what could be a dynasty right now. I'm just giving them props. It's nothing about the Bills. I just think Kansas City is a special team, even without Tyreek Hill. I think they'll be ready on Sunday.
And I think
I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Let me back you up a little bit too. I mean, Bills fans. I mean, come on. You won an Arrowhead last year in the regular season and came and lost in the playoffs. I mean, doesn't maybe losing this year, in the regular season, if it switches, wouldn't you want that flipped? Wouldn't you want to kind of have that revenge factor in the playoffs? Because we had the revenge factor last year. So
I think that's a big
factor to have.
The big thing is the Bills are going to not probably drop the amount of games they lost last year. So this is huge for that the game not being in Arrowhead. And I think Sean McDermott has said it all off season. They built their it's a testament to the Chiefs. They built their roster to win this one game. They didn't build their roster to beat the Dolphins. They didn't. They built this and not the Ravens either. They built this roster to beat the Chiefs. Literally,
that's what it comes down to in this game.
Yeah.
Can the Bills generate that pressure and actually knock Mahomes down? Because we saw the second half, and maybe it's the second half and overtime of last year that's scaring me. The fact that the Bills could have 2 potentially game-winning touchdowns in under 2 minutes, and yet you still can't stop them with 13 seconds left. And then overtime, it was just
Mike. You know where they got better over anywhere though? Maybe in their coaching decisions. Last year, it did not get onto the field, and hence a special teams coordinator getting fired to squib the ball.
If this game is in Buffalo, I'm picking the Bills. This game is in Kansas City. That's ultimately what it came down to. I think whoever gets home field advantage, whether it's the Chiefs,
that's why they need it, Mike, because it matters.
Winning the Super Bowl.
That's why they need it.
I don't have any respect for any of the NFC teams right now. I don't, even Philly. Like, good for them. Nice start.
We need to put Mahomes on the road in the playoffs.
If Philly plays KC or Buffalo, they're losing. And the whole rest of the AFC, I know you guys probably have a little bit of maybe a little bit of worry when you play LA, just because the Chargers do tend to give you guys difficult games. But outside of the Chargers, I don't think there's any team in football that matches up with these guys, with you or the Bills. So yes, I'm a little scared, but that's just because it's the only game of the year. I feel like I actually have nerves going in because I have no clue how it's actually going to play out. So
I feel a very similar way, honestly. I know you guys don't feel this exact way, but there is something too. I grew up, rooting for a Chiefs team that, is very bad, and all of a sudden they're Super Bowl champions, and there is some complacency as a fan you get, when they're playing like a Colts team. You kind of, it's a letdown game as a fan too, right? You don't have the same emotional get up as you do, for these kind of games. So I'm definitely, this is one of the games that make you feel like a kind of like, a kid again, in terms of like, the fandom. Like, this is a really juicy game, get you on the edge of your seat. Kind of, you get a little more upset with the bad calls, a little more kind of frustrated. It's all those, man.
You can't get more mad than the roughing the passer yesterday.
Oh my God. So. Don't bring it up. Come on.
We're putting Mike into concussion protocol.
Guys, everybody's calling me out. This is why you gotta be careful now as a Bills fan.
And Mike's being realistic. Will he end up being right? We'll have to see on Sunday.
I hope I'm wrong. It's a coin flip. When you say they could lose, they could also easily win. And
that one sack difference, just like last year in the playoffs. If Von Miller gets down Mahomes, maybe even once, that's all it takes. If the Bills squib the ball, it's all it takes. If there's a multitude of scenarios there, like I was the one screaming for Gabe Davis to kneel the ball at the 2-yard line last year, because I think that you can't give any time on the clock. It was outlandish to say that, but I'm always that kind of person. Just even against the Ravens, who aren't quite the Chiefs, they did the right thing by relying on a 1-yard field goal in that situation. And I think the Bills would have done better snapping the ball from the 2-yard line 4 times to try to win it, rather than give the ball to Mahomes in any capacity with timeouts. Different than if he didn't have any timeouts, and that wouldn't have mattered. But it was some coaching decisions. I think the Bills have gotten better to compete with Reed on the coaching end more than even on the field. So they've shown some practice. They've done some really good things here early on in this season. And I think the Bills are in really good shape coaching wise and better than they've been in the last 5 years. So that's where I think, in my opinion, run defense, whatever, that's where this is going to be a big difference. But Ron, we really appreciate you coming on here. Yeah. We have the Cover One film room coming up now. Eric Turner, Kendall Merksey, Anthony Prohaska to break down some film. We appreciate everybody on the Cover One Podcast Network. The comments were roaring. We got everybody up and armed over Mike. No one likes his coin flip comment. Hey, so we're gonna have to leave everybody with that.
One last thought. To all the comments calling me out, hey, it's fair. If the Bills end up winning and they win this one comfortably, call me out for the rest of the season. I will embrace it. I will be happy to have the hate. But you know what? I just give props to teams until they prove they don't deserve it. The Chiefs have won 3 of the last 4. Yes, they crapped themselves in the AFC Championship against Cincinnati.
Yes, they did.
Bengals just had their number last year, just like the Chiefs, for the most part, have had the Bills number. Yes, everybody's talking about how the Bills won on Sunday Night Football. Cool. That game didn't mean anything. They lost on Sunday. They won on Sunday Night Football, and then the Bills lost to the AFC divisional round. I don't care about that game. I care about winning the big games when it matters.
It should have mattered, Mike, last year, and it didn't. The Bills did not put themselves in position.
The Chiefs were 2-3. The Bills were 4-1, and the Chiefs ended up being the higher seeded team in the playoffs.
That's so the more unfortunate part, right?
Hey, this could go either way, guys. Let's enjoy the game.
The Bills just decided to not play football in the middle.
Chiefs Nation is going to enjoy this. Bills Mafia is going to enjoy it. And hopefully next week, me and Kev are celebrating a little bit.
There you go.
We'll see.
Ron, thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, as I know I follow you and get some good Chiefs content, which does matter beyond just week 6. No one's playing for week 6 as much as this is fun. Tell us where we can find your content and what you got going on.
Well, yeah, I follow you too. And honestly, Bill's Twitter is insane. You guys, are some of the most thorough in terms of stats and all that and just breakdowns. You guys are great football fans. So shout out Bills Mafia. I am the lead analyst at arrowheadpride.com. It's an SB Nation site. So follow me on Twitter at Ron_Kopp, KOPP. I'm writing every day for arrowheadpride.com and, I'm a very frequent Twitter user. So yeah, follow me on Twitter. Appreciate it.
Ron, appreciate you. Used to love jumping on your rooms as well back in the day of doing live chat. So
gotta be more
get out. Yeah, I know. Get out there and follow Ron for some great Chiefs content all season long leading into the playoffs. Both these teams are pretty much secured to at least be in the dance. So follow Ron along for his ride and as we get closer to week 17. But from the Going Deep podcast, Kevin Misseri, Mike Bunt, really appreciate Ron jumping on here for this special edition. And we'll revisit this. Maybe we'll have a part 2 of the crossover, hopefully in the championship game this year and not the divisional round going forward here. But Kevin, Mike, Going Deep podcast, stay tuned for the Cover One film room coming up here shortly, as well as all the great content here on the Cover One podcast network. We'll talk to everybody soon.
Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown. Play action.